Después llegué al estadio, al estadio Colo-Colo y yo estaba sentado estirando y en el desagüe sale excremento de nosotros mismos, que no lo quiero decir porque no me gusta la palabra, en la ducha. Y tú decías entonces, ¿es una selección o es un equipo de tercera?
During the last decade, Chile witnessed the most successful period in their history. Back-to-back Copa America wins in 2015 and 2016, two consecutive round of 16 runs in the World Cup, and a golden generation of footballers playing for the most important prizes in club football. However, following their notable absence from the 2018 World Cup, Chile entered a massive downward spiral that they simply can't climb out of. In the space of 2 years, Chile has only won 2 official matches and they currently sit in 8th place in the South American qualification group for the next World Cup, which means that even with an expansion, Chile could still miss out on the biggest edition of all time. So how could that happen? How could they drop off so badly? In this video, I'll pinpoint the reasons behind Chile's massive downfall, and by the end of it, I'm sure you'll realize this has very little to do with the aging of their golden generation. But before we start, if this isn't the first time watching this channel, please consider subscribing. With your help, we've already achieved 2,000 subscribers, and now it's time to aim at 10,000. Now without further ado, let's get right to it. So for starters, and to get the obvious reason out of the way, Chile is still very reliant on their old stars. It's ridiculous actually. Alexis Sanchez, Gary Medel, Arturo Vidal are all in their late 30s, way out of their respective primes, and they still featured regularly for the national team during this past year. Hell, even Claudio Bravo, who I didn't know was still playing, featured in a match against Paraguay in 2023. But the worst part is that this isn't really a case of old players having a lot of power in their national team. They're still there because there's simply nobody to replace them. Even though Sanchez is an afterthought in Inter, he is still Chile's best attacking option. Arturo Vidal, when he comes back from injury, will probably still have his place because there's no one at his level. Even Gary Medel, who looks more like a construction worker than a footballer nowadays, still finds himself in the starting 11 because of their 3-defender system. But you see, the national team is just a reflection of all the bad decisions made at club level. Back in the day, teams from Chile would be able to have decent runs in both Libertadores and Copa Sudamericana, but nowadays, that seems like a rarity, especially after many clubs were privatized. While in Europe, the privatization of clubs is often associated with increased financial resources, leading to improvements in facilities and player quality, in Chile, the opposite appears to be true. There's a lot of corruption in South America in general, and Chile in particular. Many players are bought for more than what they're worth, and in most cases clubs prefer to invest in older talent, simply because their scouting isn't effective. You can have all the money in the world, if you don't know how to handle it, you can even end up in worse situations than before, and Chilean clubs are no different. In that clip shown in the beginning of the video, Sanchez was talking about how the showers from Colo-Colo Stadium had shit coming out of the drains. If that happens in the richest club, I can only imagine what goes on in the rest of the stadiums. If the clubs don't have their basic needs covered, do you really think they're hiring the best youth coaches to develop top youth prospects? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me many kids at youth level had no locker rooms to get themselves dressed. But even when some genetically gifted player rises from Chile's crooked youth level system, he still has to pass another obstacle: the lack of trust by the senior team managers. You see, not only do they buy older players, but they also very rarely give opportunities to youngsters. It's very common for a Chilean player to only make his senior debut at 21 or 22 years old, and in those cases, his career is already doomed before he'd even had a chance to start. By their scouters' logic, if you didn't debut at 18 or even younger, it's because you're not good enough. Therefore, little to no top division clubs will give you a chance to prove them wrong. On the other hand, if you're one of the few talented kids that made their debut as a teenager, the odds aren't on your side either. In the best case scenario, a bigger club in South America will notice you, giving you a chance to continue your development so you can take the jump to Europe, and then it's up to you to turn your promising talents into valuable assets for your club and country. But in most cases, that isn't what happens. As a gifted teenager who just rose above poverty, all eyes are on yourself. Suddenly you're the next big thing, but also a large fish in a small aquarium. That combination of factors often leads to laziness and bad habits, which in turn contribute to injuries, and as a consequence of that time spent in the sidelines, stagnation. The situation is dire, and it's apparent that there is no long-term plan to improve anything. Since they began their downfall, the Chilean national team has had 4 different managers from 4 different nationalities, and none of them seem to have the answer. I mean, after all, you can't really make lemonade without lemons. But to be fair, Chile's golden generation was a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Never in 113 years of history have the Chileans had such a stacked group of talented players competing in the biggest clubs in the world. However, that shouldn't serve as an excuse for the massive downgrade we're witnessing. Their rise didn't happen out of nowhere. All of the players that lifted 2 Copa America titles over Argentina came from the same clubs that nowadays invest so little in their youth academies. They weren't simply more gifted than the current crop of players. They were coached better in all aspects, especially in what comes to their mental fortitude. And even if you go further back in time, before the start of this golden generation in the late 2000s, things were never this bad. Sure, they were never the best team in South America, but they always had frequent presences in the World Cup, with their fighting spirit and cohesion being their biggest strengths. Nowadays, with the rise of Ecuador and Venezuela, Chile is in serious danger of becoming the second worst team in the South American continent, their toughest low after their most glorious high. And that is it for the video. Don't forget to leave a like so I know you want to watch more content like this, and subscribe to never miss the most interesting football discussions, stories, and top 10 lists. Thank you for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you soon.